Welcome to the world of science fiction stories, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe my channel. Enjoy the listening. The galaxy abandoned hope. Until Earth's nightmare fleet appeared. Commander TRZ Naren stared out the cracked view screen of the Vidian High Command Center, wondering, not for the first time, if sending that blasted distress signal had been a complete waste of the precious little power they had left. His antenna drooped pathetically as another distant explosion rocked the compound, sending fine particles of metallic dust raining down from the ceiling. Perfect, just what my already ruined uniform needed, more grime, he muttered. Status report, he barked, though the crack in his voice betrayed the fear he was desperately trying to hide. Lieutenant Farah Blas, a usually composed centurion with skin the color of twilight, frantically tapped at her console. Not good, Commander. 3 more settlement domes have gone dark in the southern quadrant. DRXY and drop ships are landing in sectors 7 through 13. Casualty reports are, well, they're coming in faster than our systems can process them. Fantastic, Traz muttered, sarcasm practically dripping from his mandibles. And our planetary defense grid is down to 177% capacity. Those DRXY and pulse cannons are specifically calibrated to disrupt our shield harmonics, almost like, they knew exactly what frequencies we were using. Her laugh wasn't from humor, it was that special kind of laugh that happens when things are so catastrophically terrible that your brain short-circuits and decides laughing is the appropriate response. Traz slammed his 3-fingered hand against the tactical display. Because someone sold us out. When I find which of the Council species leaked our defense protocols, I'll personally feed them to a Jovian acid slug, slowly. Gay. The entire command center fell silent at his outburst. 26 pairs of eyes from 7 different species were all pointedly looking anywhere but at their commander. He couldn't blame them. The Vidian Alliance, once proud peacekeepers of the Orion Spur, were reduced to cowering in their last functional command center while the Droyan Empire methodically eradicated their civilization. Communications. Traz called out, trying to sound authoritative despite it all. Any responses to our distress call? Communications Officer Plik Rindar As, a short, furry prion with twitchy ears, shook his head so vigorously that his translator pendant bounced against his chest. Nothing from the Galactic IC Concord. The Elian Federation is, quote, deeply concerned about the situation, but apparently not concerned enough to send a single ship. The Uzi Confederacy claims their battle fleet is undergoing scheduled maintenance, all 11,000 vessels simultaneously. What an incredible coincidence. He threw his paws up in exasperation. Everyone's too scared of the Drans to help. What about, Lieutenant Blas lowered her voice, glancing around nervously. The humans, the command center erupted in nervous chittering and clicking sounds, the Vidian equivalent of scoffing. Admiral Vox Pella, who until now had been silently watching from the corner, finally spoke up. His voice carried the grave weight of someone who had seen too many wars across too many star systems. You want to bring those barbarians into this? You've heard the stories. Their so-called Reaper fleet once reduced an entire moon to rubble because someone insulted their admiral's hat, and their negotiation strategy involves carrying ridiculously oversized weapons to diplomatic meetings. Traz closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command crushing him more thoroughly than the Droyan bombardment ever could. We sent the signal to every allied and neutral system in range, including Earth, but, let's be realistic, no one is coming. Especially not the humans. They haven't responded to any intercell communications in over 3 solar cycles, he said, as if punctuating his pessimism. Another explosion, much closer this time, shook the command center, causing several consoles to spark dramatically. Well, Traz said, side-drawing his ceremonial blade. I always wanted my last stand to be more dignified, but I suppose being obliterated by the universe's most sadistic empire while covered in sealing dust will have to do. At least the humans aren't here to see us fail, they probably just laugh and sell tickets to the show. If only he knew how wrong he was. Ambassador Krell's skepticism cut through the tension. Ambassador Lorik Krell adjusted his ceremonial collar for the 14th time in as many minutes. The Dryan bombardment had stopped temporarily, no doubt leaving behind an eerie silence that felt more threatening than the explosions. He paced the length of the emergency bunker, his scaled feet clicking against the metal floor with irritating precision. "Would you please stop that infernal pacing, H?" "Admiral Vox," growled Vox, not bothering to look up from the holographic battle maps. "Some of us are trying to calculate exactly how doomed we are." Krell snorted, his nostril slits flaring dramatically. "Oh, I can tell you precisely how doomed we are without all those fancy calculations. We are, using the technical diplomatic term, completely and utterly screwed." "Your optimism is overwhelming." "Commander Traz," muttered Traz, rubbing his temples, "remind me why we brought the ambassador to our last functional command center." "Because," Krell replied, drawing himself up to his full, unimpressive height, "when the Drans finally breach these walls, which they will probably do within the next 12 hours, someone needs to negotiate our surrender with a modicum of dignity." Lieutenant Blas barked out a laugh that sounded suspiciously like a sob. "Dignity? The Drans don't accept surrenders, they accept trophies, preferably skulls. Hence my excessive attention to my collar." Krell replied with a theatrical sigh. "If my skull is destined for some Dryan general's trophy case, I want it to look presentable. First impressions matter, even in death." Suddenly, Communications Officer Plick jerked upright, his furry ears twitching wildly. "Wait. I'm picking up something on the long-range scanners, multiple objects entering the system." "That can't be right," Traz demanded, hurrying over. "These velocity readings, they're impossible. Nothing moves that fast, not even Dryan warships." Ambassador Krell snorted again, the sound remarkably similar to a deflating balloon. "Don't get excited, it's probably just sensor ghosts, or perhaps the sweet release of death playing tricks on our desperate minds." "No, it's definitely ships," Plick insisted, his paws dancing across the console. "A lot of ships, and they're broadcasting on, oh, no, what now?" Admiral Vox demanded, "They're broadcasting on human frequencies." The room fell so silent you could have heard a Nanobi, or dust, for that matter, sneeze. "Humans," Kell finally sputtered, his scales turning a sickly shade of yellow. "Failed calls for help, impossible. Those psychotic primates never responded to our distress call." "Apparently they did," Plick replied, adjusting his translator. "According to these readings, they'll be here in approximately 7 minutes." Kell collapsed dramatically into the nearest chair, which groaned in protest. "Wonderful, absolutely wonderful, we escaped death by DRXY, and only to be rescued by humans. Have you people heard what they did in the Proxima conflict? Their idea of a peace treaty involved 18 separate clauses about acceptable barbecue techniques." "I thought that was just propaganda," Lieutenant Blas whispered. "It wasn't," Kell hissed. "I was there as a junior attaché. Their Admiral Burke insisted that proper meat-smoking techniques were non-negotiable for civilized discourse. They cooked dead animals over fire for fun. What kind of species does that?" "The kind with the biggest guns in the sector, perhaps," Admiral Vox remarked. "Dryan, and right now, I'd welcome G and Slime Devils if they brought enough firepower." "You don't understand," Kell moaned, covering his face with his hands. "If the humans are coming, it can only mean one thing, they're sending them." "Them?" Traz asked, antenna twitching nervously. "The Reaper fleet," Krell whispered, as if saying the name too loudly might summon them faster. The surprise arrival of Earth's infamous Reaper fleet was announced as the command center's main view screen flickered to life just as the proximity alarms began wailing with renewed urgency. The image stabilized to reveal the vast blackness of space, and then, like ghosts materializing from the void itself, they appeared, ships, human ships. But calling them merely ships was like calling a supernova a light show by the 7 moons. Lieutenant Blas whispered, her violet skin paling to a sickly lavender, "Those can't possibly be to scale," but they were. The lead vessel, the Behemoth, defied conventional starship architecture. It stretched nearly 5 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull wasn't the sleek, aesthetically pleasing design favored by most civilized species. No, this monstrosity looked like someone had taken several asteroid mining platforms, bolted on excessive weaponry, and then, as an afterthought, added enormous engines that glowed with an ominous red light. "The HSS Harbinger," murmured Ambassador Krell, unable to tear his eyes away from the screen. "Flagship of the Reaper fleet. I've seen classified images, but they don't capture the sheer absurdity of it." Behind the Harbinger came at least 24 more vessels, each unique in its grotesque design yet unified in their apparent disregard for conventional space aesthetics or physics. Some were long and angular, bristling with what appeared to be hundreds of weapon ports, others were bulbous and slow-moving, their hulls scarred with marks that looked suspiciously like the imprints of smaller ships that had collided with them and been lost. "Are those actual skeletons painted on the hull?" Commander Traz asked, squinting at one particularly menacing destroyer, its stylized calcium structures representing the concept of the Grim Reaper. Krell corrected automatically, "The humans have this bizarre cultural fixation on personifying death as a hooded skeleton, and yes, they painted them on their warships because, of course, they do." Admiral Vox leaned forward, his experienced eyes narrowing as he looked at their formation. "They're not just arriving, they're deploying for battle." As if to confirm his observation, the human fleet began spreading out with surprising grace, forming a three-dimensional pattern that somehow managed to look both chaotic and perfectly coordinated. An incoming transmission interrupted the tension. Plick yelped, nearly falling out of his chair, as audio and visual from the Harbinger were put on screen. Traz ordered, straightening his uniform in a futile attempt to look presentable. The view screen changed to show a human bridge that looked more like a cross between a cathedral and an industrial accident. In the center stood a human female, her dark skin contrasting sharply with a white uniform adorned with so many medals it was a wonder she could stand upright. Her hair was pulled back in tight braids, revealing a face that might have been considered attractive by human standards but was currently set in an expression that made everyone in the command center instinctively want to hide. "This is Admiral Morgan Walsh of the Earth Reaper Fleet," she announced, her voice surprisingly melodious for someone who commanded a ship that could probably crack a planet in half. "We received your distress call. Sorry we're late, we stopped to pick up some party favors." The camera panned to show what appeared to be several dozen missiles the size of small buildings. "The Drans and I have some unfinished business." Kel fainted dead away, the last resort of contacting Earth, crumpling to the floor with a thud that nobody bothered to acknowledge. "Holy cosmic dust," Lieutenant Blas breathed. They actually came. First contact between aliens and humans had arrived. Commander Morgan Walsh's image dominated the screen. Nobody moved to help Ambassador Krell as he lay sprawled on the floor, they were all too transfixed by the human on screen, this Admiral Morgan Walsh, who somehow managed to look both perfectly groomed and as if she had just finished wrestling a star bear. "Well?" Admiral Walsh prompted, one eyebrow raising dangerously high. "Is anyone there going to say something, or should I assume this is a prank call and take my fleet elsewhere? I hear the Andromedans are having a civil war, could be fun, what?" Commander Traz stumbled forward, nearly tripping over Krell's prone form. "Admiral Walsh, the Vidian Alliance, thank you for your unexpected arrival. I am Commander Traz Naren of the Vidian Defense Force, what's left of it, anyway." Walsh's eyes narrowed as she leaned closer to her screen. "You all look terrible. How long have the Drans been bombarding your planet?" 17 standard cycles, Admiral Vox answered, stepping forward with the dignity of someone who had seen too much to be intimidated, even by a human. "They started with our outer colonies, then moved inward. This is our last defensive position." Walsh nodded, then turned to bark orders at someone off-screen. "Tactical, give me a full scan of the DRXY imp positions, medical, prepare drop teams with relief supplies, and someone, wake up Captain Chen, tell him he gets to test those new bunker buster missiles he's been so excited about." She turned back to the screen, her expression softer but still terrifyingly competent. The cavalry has arrived. Command Naren, now I need your tactical data, access to your defense grid, what's left of it, and someone who can point us toward the biggest, baddest Droyan warship in the sector. Lieutenant Blas cautiously raised her hand. That would be the Dread Eclipse, 30 kilometers long, equipped with planet cracker beams and protected by energy shields that have repelled everything we've thrown at them. A slow, predatory smile spread across Walsh's face, the kind of smile that had probably preceded extinction events. Perfect. I've been looking for something to test our new quantum torpedoes on. They cost so much that our Congress nearly had a collective aneurysm approving them from the floor. Ambassador Krell groaned and sat up, looking disoriented. Did I miss anything? Please tell me, I dreamed the humans arriving. Oh, good, the diplomats are awake, Walsh remarked, her smile turning decidedly shark-like. I don't believe we've been properly introduced, Ambassador Krell, she muttered as he struggled to his feet with as much dignity as he could muster. Lorik Krell, senior ambassador of the Vidian Alliance, he managed, to which Ambassador Walsh replied in a tone that suggested she was anything but charmed. Tell me, what exactly did your diplomatic corps say when the Drans demanded your surrender? Krell cleared his throat uncomfortably. We, attempted to negotiate favorable terms of planetary occupation with minimal civilian casualties. Walsh's laughter was sharp enough to cut diamonds. And how did that work out for you? They responded by bombarding our 3 largest population centers, Krell admitted, his scales flushing a deep orange with shame. Of course they did, Walsh sighed, shaking her head. You tried to reason with the Drans, that's adorable, like trying to negotiate with a black hole. A massive explosion suddenly rocked the command center, sending everyone scrambling for support. Alarms blared as emergency lights bathed the room in pulsing red. Direct hit on level 3, someone shouted. They've broken through the eastern perimeter. Walsh's expression hardened. Looks like diplomacy time is over. Commander Naren, prepare your people for extraction, we're coming down. Coming down? Traz repeated weakly. You mean, you're sending shuttles? The Admiral's grin was positively terrifying, another voice observed. Shuttles are for tourists. We prefer a more direct approach, the devastating battle against the Droyan Empire. The command center's view screen split into multiple feeds showing various angles of the planet's surface and orbit. What unfolded next would later be described by Ambassador Krell in his much-acclaimed memoir as, How I Survived the Humans as Beautiful Carnage. From the belly of the massive ships, smaller vessels began to emerge, not in neat, orderly rows as Vidian military protocol would dictate, but in a chaotic swarm that somehow still maintained perfect tactical cohesion. Some were sleek interceptors that moved with impossible speed, others were bulky troop carriers, bristling with weapons that looked like they could punch through a small moon. What are those? Lieutenant Blas asked, pointing to several cylindrical objects dropping straight toward the planet's surface. Admiral Vox's eyes widened. Orbital drop pods. They're using orbital drop pods, that's insane. Krell sputtered, no civilized species uses drop pods anymore, the fatality rate is acceptable. Admiral Walsh's voice rang over the comm. She was no longer on screen, presumably because she was too busy preparing to fling herself toward the planet at terminal velocity. We find that a 30% survival rate keeps everyone motivated. 30%, Traz echoed weakly. Walsh's laugh crackled through the speakers. Just kidding, it's more like 98% these days. The other 2%? Well, they get really impressive funerals. Before anyone could respond to this disturbing attempt at humor, the first human ships engaged the Droyan fleet. It wasn't just a battle, it was pandemonium, orchestrated with terrifying precision. The Droyan warships, previously so intimidating as they systematically reduced Vidian cities to rubble, suddenly looked sluggish and outdated compared to the human vessels that danced around them. Human interceptors darted between DRXY and energy beams with what appeared to be casual disregard for the laws of physics. Larger human cruisers absorbed hits that should have vaporized them, their strange patchwork hulls glowing briefly before returning fire with weapons that left reality-distorting ripples in their wake, or those black hole generators. Commander Traz, whispered Traz, watching as a Dryan destroyer was compressed into a space roughly the size of a dinner plate. Microsingularity projectors, a human voice, not Walsh's, corrected him. A moment later, a new face appeared on a secondary screen, a human male with facial hair arranged in what appeared to be deliberate patches on his chin and upper lip. Captain Rick Chen, HSS Valkyrie, the new voice announced. The singularities only last about 3 seconds, but that's 2 seconds longer than necessary to ruin a Roan's day. Meanwhile, in orbit above their largest city, the Droyan flagship, the dreaded Dreadn Eclipse, was attempting to bring its planet cracker beam to bear on the human vessels. Its massive energy weapon began to glow with ominous green light, building toward a discharge that could vaporize continents. "Oh, no," Krell moaned. "They're charging the main weapon." Nobody in the Vidian Command Center seemed particularly concerned about this development. In fact, Captain Chen was grinning so widely it looked like his face might split. "They've taken the bait," he announced cheerfully. "Admiral Walsh, they're right where you want them," came another transmission. From another corner of space, hidden until now behind a Vidian larger moon, the HSS Harbinger suddenly appeared, having somehow maneuvered a 5 km battleship with the stealth of a ghost. "Fire the Kraken," Walsh ordered calmly. A single projectile, of something the size of a small office building, was launched from the Harbinger's bow. It moved with deceptive slowness toward the Droyan flagship, trailing blue-white energy that looked like tentacles. "What is that thing?" Traz asked, unable to tear his gaze from the screen. Captain Chen's grin somehow grew even wider. "We call it the Kraken. It's basically a quantum-entangled, multi-phase torpedo with a compressed dark matter core, or as our engineers like to say, it's a really big boom in a really small package." The torpedo struck the Droyan flagship just as its planet cracker beam reached full charge. For one breathless moment, nothing happened, then, like a star being born in reverse, the massive Droyan vessel imploded, folding in on itself with impossible geometries, before exploding outward in a spectacular burst that momentarily outshone even the Vidian bullseye check, as one casual officer remarked, as if they hadn't just witnessed the destruction of what had previously been considered the most powerful warship in the quadrant. Victory, celebration, and new understandings. The Vidian capital city's Grand Plaza, or what remained of it, buzzed with activity as the sun set on what would later be called Liberation Day. Emergency medical stations, operated by both Vidian medics and human combat surgeons, treated the wounded. Massive human drop ships delivered supplies with efficiency that bordered on the miraculous, while overhead, human fighters continued to patrol, occasionally lighting up the darkening sky with streaks of weapons fire as they hunted down the last fleeing Droyan vessels. Commander Traz sat on a chunk of fallen monument that, until yesterday, had depicted the Vidian Alliance's founding. His uniform was torn and stained, and his left antenna hung at an odd angle, but he was alive, as were most of his people, thanks to the human, drink. Admiral Walsh stood before him, holding out a flask of something that smelled potent enough to strip paint. "Or," she added, noting his hesitation, "if it kills you, at least you'll die celebrating rather than being vaporized by those DRXY bastards." Traz surprised himself by actually laughing as he accepted the flask. "Your concern for my well-being is touching, Admiral," he said. He took a cautious sip and immediately regretted it, as liquid fire scorched a path down his 3 digestive tracts. "What is this poison?" "Tennessee whiskey," replied Walsh. "I made it myself on my family's farm between deployments." With that, Walsh dropped herself down beside him, without any of the ceremony that a Vidian admiral would normally display. "It's good stuff, right? If by good, you mean it'll send you off with a bang."